Shalom, and welcome back to Bnei Noach Academy, Thoughts on Life. Please remember to hit the like button, to subscribe, and most importantly, to share this insight and inspiration with friends and family. So, of course, you heard the news, and that is that Israel, thank God, successfully, I would say miraculously, managed to rescue 4 of its citizens. Yes, the hostages that were being held. Guess where? Amongst the innocent civilians. Yes, you heard it. Look at the news reports. Some of the people who were eliminated as the commandos, the special forces, made their way to those homes, through those homes, in order to retrieve, to liberate, to save their hostages, was a doctor and his son. What do you know? A journalist, an Al Jazeera cameraman and commentator who was spewing all this humanitarian stuff for the last 7-8 months, inciting and riling everyone up about the atrocities of the terrible Israelis. Terrible. Now, what came to mind as I was thinking about it, I want you to take a look in Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 15. And it says there, B'tzedek tishpot amitecha. In justice shall you judge your neighbor. Yes, we have an obligation to judge the other in justice. However, when you look in Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 21, it says, Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. In English, justice, justice shall you pursue. And then it says in Leman tichyeh v'yarash, in order for you to live. The Talmud actually addresses this seeming contradiction. Now, what is the contradiction here? Well, from Leviticus, it would seem that there's just a requirement for a basic level of justice. With justice, you shall judge your neighbor, quote unquote. However, here in Deuteronomy, there's an emphasis. It's not enough to just have basic justice, but we know the Torah does not have any extra words. God doesn't say anything extra, not even extra innuendo. And thus, if he repeats a word, it's for emphasis. It's telling us that it has to be in a double measure. Regular justice is not sufficient. You need to have extra justice. Well, the sages of the Talmud in tractates on him actually address this. And they say, well, there's no contradiction here. But rather, these 2 verses speak of 2 varying scenarios. And they say the difference is, this speaks of a case where there appears to be a fraudulent trial, and this speaks of a case where it's a non-fraudulent trial. When it's a non-fraudulent trial, when you can see the markings are that everything seems to be honest, and it's just 2 people who have a debate, 2 people who have some kind of litigation, some kind of misunderstanding, you approach it with justice. As it says, "By justice shall you judge your neighbor." However, when you smell, when you sense, or when it's so obvious that it's in your face, that there is injustice here, it's a very fraudulent trial, then you need to apply an extra measure of justice. What am I talking about? Well, of course, a major part of the world, of civilization, is rejoicing. This is fantastic. What a great miracle. Frankly, myself, I assumed all this time that, God forbid, maybe all the hostages are already gone. Considering who is the one that's holding them hostage, the savages that were able to perpetrate the atrocities of October 7th. To me, it was literally like hearing of people coming from the dead, almost like the resurrection of the dead. But what a great joy. People in Israel, people in the Western world rejoicing. But then you have someone like the head of the foreign policy for the EU, for the European Union. He comes out and condemns Israel about the civilian casualties. So the focus is that Israel came in as a perpetrator, not as a liberator, not to liberate their people who are being held against their will. That's not inhumane. That is fantastic. That makes sense. That is just. That is right. This is not a fraudulent trial. This is justice, at least in their perception. Israel is the perpetrators. How could they? How dare they commit this atrocity of killing so many civilians? Nothing said about the fact that they came to release the hostages, whom they asked for and they demanded. And all they said is just turn them back. And in fact, they should have been taken in the first place. And that reminds me, under what circumstances were they taken hostage? What else happened? Actually, they should be considered very lucky that they were taken hostage and not brutally killed or raped or maimed as others, hundreds of others were. You see, the Torah spoke about everything. The Torah addresses all kinds of scenarios, even these very difficult to believe, very difficult to imagine scenarios. That in the cases of what happened this Saturday, that Israel was able to miraculously rescue 4 of its own, 4 hostages, 4 human beings who did nothing wrong to anyone, other than the fact that they were Israelis. And to rescue them, to bring them back to a normal life. And what do we hear about? The atrocities, the unnecessary casualties amongst the civilian population. I rest my case.